desire your prayers. Pray that God just help me to do what little bit I can do. I'm so thankful that He's still giving me the strength and the ability to do something for Him. Those of you who have your Bibles, want to turn with me to the 1 Corinthians chapter 9. Last Sunday was Young People's Day, and I got asked Dwight if he wanted to teach, and he did, and I'm thankful for that. He mentioned something I'd mentioned before in the past. I couldn't, I just can't get my head around or wrap my head around the concept of the Big Bang Theory. It just blows my mind. Anytime I've ever seen a Big Bang, things tore all to pieces. But he read that over in Genesis 1, chapter 1, and it said over and over as he was reading and going over there, but over and over, down through there, it said, and God said. And it went from one thing to another to another. They didn't say, and God said to be a big explosion. He said, and God said. And He created with His voice. And we just need to realize that God can do anything and everything that He wants to do. He can do it. Just by speaking the word, just by whatever. And we get into troubles and trials in this old life and don't know hardly where to turn. Just turn to Him. Turn to Him and just, whatever it is, just ask God to help you. But I appreciate Dwight standing last Sunday. If you got your Bibles in chapter 9 of 1 Corinthians, we got started in it a couple of weeks ago. The young church there had quite a mixture of backgrounds in their congregation, Jews and Gentiles and whatever. A lot of backgrounds in their beliefs. A lot of them have been worshiping idols and whatever during their life, and all of a sudden here comes a man named Jesus and changed their lives. And then here come a man named Paul and Apollos and Peter, and came and delivered them the word. And they wrote a letter to Paul. This after Paul left, they wrote a letter to him and asking questions. They were just starting out. They had a lot of questions, and we've been going over that in this book of Corinthians, who to worship, how to worship, what to eat, what not to eat. And it's just been one thing after another. In chapter 9, he's answering the question that they ask about the one that's leading them here on the earth, like we have Brother Tim here. I'm so thankful God sent him our way. But I'm going to start reading in verse 7. I think we got down to about verse 10 or 11, but I'm going to get back into the thought of it in verse 7. 1 Corinthians chapter 9 and verse 7. Who goeth to warfare any time at his own charges? Who planteth a vineyard, it eateth not of the fruit thereof? Or who feedeth a flock, and eateth not of the milk of the flock? In other words, what you work at in this natural life and whatever, you get benefits from it. If you grow a garden, and a lot of us are used to grow a garden and put up food and whatever. Anyway, you put it out and you plant it and you take care of it and you hope for the best. Hope you have some food to get from it, reap from it. Do canning, freezing, whatever. But it was saying this, and what it's getting at, they're wanting to know what they do about their pastor, in other words, whatever they called it back then, their pastor. How do we take care of him? Verse 8, say I these things as a man, or saith not the law? the same also. For it is written in the law of Moses, Thou shalt not muzzle the mouth of the ox that treadeth out the corn. Doeth God take care for oxen? That's from Deuteronomy chapter 25 and verse 4. We went over that before. But any of you have pets or animals or cows or horses or anything, you got to take care of them. For them to be a benefit of them, if you don't feed them or water them or whatever, they're going to die. The man of God that God sends our way, he's doing what he has been told to do. He is doing God's will. And he's deserving of what needs to be taken and to be taken care of. Verse 10, or saith he it altogether for our sakes. It's for our sakes, no doubt. This is written, that he that ploweth should plow in hope, and he that thresheth in hope should be partaker of his hope. You know, I go back to the deal of the gardens. Like I say, a lot of us have had gardens down through the years and whatever, but you put it out and you do everything you can to try to get, beans, corns, taters, whatever out of it. Anyway, you do it trying to get results from it. And depending on the year and the weather and all that, but anyway, that's what you do. And you try to retrieve from that. Let me go on. Verse 11. If we have sown unto you spiritual things, is it a great thing if we shall reap your carnal things? He's saying that God has called them to preach. And again, I am so thankful for the men that God has called to preach or to do whatever for Him. And they are doing what God has called them to do. They need to be repaid through the churches, through individuals, through whatever, to help them in their journey and what they're doing. They need to have support. Verse 12. If others be partakers of this power over you, are not we rather? Nevertheless, we have not used this power, but suffer all things, lest we should hinder the gospel of Christ. Those of you just stepped in, I'm in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 12. He said, if others be partakers of this power over you, are not we rather? We got mayors, councilmen, congressmen, presidents, on, and they get paid. They're on a salary, they get paid, we pay taxes, and that pays them and whatever. They get what they get, It goes on, nevertheless, we have not used this power. Paul come into their area, and he was a tent maker by trade. And he come in there and just started working and doing what he could and whatever, and started telling them about Jesus. They didn't call him or hire him or whatever, but he was freely doing that. And when I say freely, I mean that was God's calling for him to do. And he come in there and was doing that. He says, we have not used this power, but suffer all things, lest we should hinder the gospel of Christ. He said, we didn't ask you for money. We didn't ask you for carnal things. We come in there and we was doing what God called us to do. The results he was looking for was people saved. And the fact that 1 Corinthians here, the Corinth had a church is proof that their work paid off. There was some that accept Jesus Christ. There was some saved. They started. And as I said earlier, when they got started, they was from backgrounds that was some completely different. I am so blessed to be brought up in church all my life. I've been in Sunday school teachers and whatever telling me about Jesus. Parents that was Christian, I've been so blessed in that. These people, a lot of them, didn't even know what was going on. And all of a sudden, they were told about a man named Jesus Christ, the Son of God, and accepted it. Their lives changed. But then up here, they've still got the background, how they was raised, worshiping idols, Baal, all these things. It was still up here. They were trying to convert a good Christian. I'm not, what come across my mind is anybody here that doesn't commit a sin, raise your hand. I ain't going to go there. But anyway, we all sin. We all come short. But these people had backgrounds they're arguing among themselves about what do we eat? How do we worship? How do we handle this? And in this particular chapter right here, well, we've got a leader, whoever it is right there, but how do we handle it? Are we supposed to pay him or what? And they've asked Paul in this letter, question him. And Paul's letting them know, they're worthy of their work. Paul is saying here, said, nevertheless, we didn't require that. We come in to tell you about Jesus. God looked after Paul, took care of him. He got a job, tent making or whatever. He did it and was able to talk to him on the Sabbath day or whatever and tell him about Jesus Christ. Was able to develop a church. He'd been blessed. These people have been blessed. Has anybody got any comments so far? Verse 13. Okay, let me back up on 12 again. Nevertheless, we have not used this power. They did not request it. He did not request, hey, I'll preach to you if you give me some money. He didn't do that. But suffer all things lest we should hinder the gospel of Christ. That was his primary goal. Paul had been called by Jesus Christ to preach the word and to go into the Gentiles and whatever it took. And he was willing to do whatever it took to see the lost saved. Ain't that an attitude? I've taken over from here to here. Got called here, but it up here is, whatever it takes, I'm going to do that. Verse 13. Do you not know that they which minister holy things live of the things of the temple, and they which wait at the altar are partakers with the altar? And he's talking about the priests and so on with the Jewish temples and so on, and probably with the Gentiles with some of their idols and all that they had, temples and all for, Baal and whatever. They said, they get taken care of. Paul's saying, we preach Jesus Christ. Verse 14. Even so hath the Lord ordained that they which preach the gospel should live of the gospel. God has promised him, called him to preach, told him to go to the Gentiles, and God is watching over him and taking care of him. Now, I know he's life. He had put in jail, had stripes, and all kinds of things. But God through his life, he pulled him through as he was needing to. Verse 15. But I have used none of these things, neither have I written these things, that it should be so done unto me. For it were better for me to die than that any man should make my glorying void. He is willing to do whatever he can to see the lost saved. Work making tents during the day and preach the word at night or whatever he had to do. He was willing to try to do all that he could do to see the lost saved. It were better for me to die than that any man should make my glorying void. Verse 16, for though I preach the gospel, I have nothing to glory of. Think about that. God has called him to preach, given the words to preach, and he's obeying. He said, he is doing what he has been called to do. Years ago, I'm retired now and retarded too. But anyway, when I was working, if I didn't do what I was supposed to do, they'd have fired me. I'd been gone. He has been called to preach. He said, I preach the word and someone gets saved, he can just thank God and bless God and whatever, but he can't, stand back, look what I did. No. You do what God leads you to do, and then let him do the blessing and the rewarding. For though I preach the gospel, I have nothing to glory of, for necessity has laid upon me. Yea, woe is unto me if I preach not the gospel. Like I said a while ago, if when I was working, I went to work. If I didn't do my job, they would have fired me. Paul has been called to preach, sent into a great mission. God is blessing him, but said, woe unto me if I preach not the gospel. Like I'd have been. God's called him to do something. I couldn't believe it. A little over 50 years ago when they come to me and asked me if I'd stand and teach. I mean, I shook, and I can't imagine how I was so bashful and backward. But, something inside of me was telling me to do it. That's all I can say, so do it. And I didn't have a talent for it. I didn't know what I was doing, but I did it. I did it because it was one of them things I couldn't say no to, because God was still helping me and pushing me, and I was learning and starting out. And, well, I did. And here, like I said, some 50-some years later, He's still allowed me to stand and do. But I ain't glorying in nothing I do. It's verse 17. For if I do this thing willingly, I have a reward. But if against my will, a dispensation of the gospel is committed unto me. Well, I don't like it. I'm just going to get up there and read it and sit down and forget about it. That's what it's. I mean, I will get my reward. I'll be paid for what I do, and in blessings and whatever. In other words, you try your best. You do your best. God wants you to get up and sing a song. You get up there and decide, well, I'm just going to read it. God called you to do something. You do it to the best of your ability. And if you don't, you will be rewarded. However, it'll be dealt out to you one way or the other. Anybody got any comments on any of this? Well, I thank you for saying that, but you know, whatever it is, as long as the Lord leads you and allows you to do it, you do the best you can at it. Anyone else? Verse 18. What is my reward then? He's asking a question. What am I getting out of it? Verily that, when I preach the gospel, I make the gospel of Christ without charge, that I abuse not my power in the gospel. I know in my lifetime, several times it's hit major news, national news of ministers that have gone into business of just making money, just doing it for name and money and having all kinds of gambling and whatever going on the sides and whatever. Well, they get caught up with it, makes the news and whatever, they get their reward. They wasn't doing it for Christ's sake. But he says here that he does through the blessings of God. Verse 19, for though I be free from all men, yet have I made myself servant unto all, that I might gain the more. He was free as far as a free man, decisions and so on, just like we are. We're free to make our decisions or not, or whatever. He says, I have made myself a servant unto all. When God called him to preach, and Christ wanted, go to the Gentiles, so they're really needing it, and he went through a lot of obstacles. He didn't face. If it was up here by myself, I'd be down. I'd be out. It takes God's help. I know that. I found that out a long time. I get up here, I'm shaking, I'm nervous, can't hardly talk, and then God takes over, and all of a sudden it just comes out of my mouth. I don't even hardly know what I'm saying. It just comes, and all I can do is read and study, and then let Him take over. Verse 20. And unto the Jews I became as a Jew, that I might gain the Jews. To them that are under the law, as under the law, that I might gain them that are under the law. I'm talking about the Jewish nation. He was trying to preach and teach to everyone. Verse 21. To them that are without law, as without law, in other words, being not being without God over them or whatever, but not being raised under the Ten Commandments and all the things that the Jews went through. But to them that are without law, as without law, being not without law to God, but under the law to Christ, that I might gain them that are without law. Now, let me go on. To the weak became I as weak, that I might gain the weak. I am made all things to all men, that I might by all means save some. Whether he's talking to the Jews, whether he's talking to the Gentiles, it doesn't matter. He said, I made the same to all. He's saved by Jesus Christ. He's sent out into the world to try to tell them about Jesus that they might be saved. He said, I'm the same wherever I'm at. I hate to, and I have down through the years run into somebody that, you see some place they're one way, you see them somewhere else or something else. They act completely different. We're supposed to be the same. We are supposed to be the same. We be a Christian. We should let our light shine wherever we at. We need to let our fellow workers or school kids or wherever you're at, our light shine to let people know that we are a Christian. Anybody on this? Yeah. Yeah. God saw a lot of qualities in Paul, and as his name was Saul then, but I mean before he's converted, I mean he was a tough man going hard as he could against the Christian movement, as you said. I mean he was like the leader against them. It seems like, but then Jesus came into his life, and his life changed, and it was just, remarkable. But God saw qualities in Paul that was able to use for the Christian movement. Sure did. Anything else? I didn't mean to cut you off. Yeah. 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 That's right. Yeah. 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 He was God's best. There's no doubt about that. Anyone else? In that 22nd verse, to the weak became I as weak, that I might gain the weak. I made all things to all men, that I might by all means save some. That was his purpose, to do all that he could within himself to communicate with others. He was going to the Gentiles, he was going to the Jews and whatever else, but he was going to all kinds of different types of people, but he was wanting to communicate and be one-on-one where he could tell them the main thing, and that was Jesus Christ. Verse 23, and this I do for the gospel's sake, that I might be partaker thereof with you. Okay, he does it for the gospel's sake. He has been saved already been mentioned. Christ come into his life. He gave him a job to do, and he's doing that. And when he goes and he delivers that message to them, he's wanting to be also one of them. I mean, we're all children of God. You know, he's just one of them too. But he's wanting to do his part. We need to try to remember to try to always do our part. Whatever it is, we try to do our part for Christ. Verse 24. Know ye not that they which run in a race run all, but one receiveth the prize? So run that you may obtain. If you used to get into a marathon or something like that and run whatever lengths, all kinds of different lengths, but these people train and train and train, and then the big day comes, and all they can do is go out there and do their best. They're trying to gain that trophy. They're trying to get that number one spot. In our work for Christ, work like you're working. We're trying to see the lost saved. If I was the type of person and I come to church and tried to be a sunshine in here, then walk out them doors and all of a sudden foul mouth and drinking and everything else, I mean, I ain't doing nothing. You know, I'm tearing down everything. You know, we got to be a Christian. We need to be a Christian wherever we're at, 24 hours a day. We need to live to shine to others if we can at all. I mean, we do the best we can. Like you're running that race to get that trophy. We're trying to see someone come and be saved. Not that we cannot jump back and say, well, look what we did, but look what God did. Through our work, we're just instruments. We're tools. One Sunday morning, many years ago, I mean, my wife and I were just starting out, and preacher come to me during intermission between Sunday school and church, preaching. He said, Bob, do you have a toolbox with you? Yeah. But man, it was rusty. I mean, all I had was hand-me-downs and stuff that I'd collected. I mean, I didn't have a great big nice toolbox. I said, would you go get it? And he went, I went and got it, brought it in, a little old rusty, scratched up little old toolbox. I brought it in there, and thank you. He took it, went up there, and that was his message that morning. He was preaching. He just opened it up and started looking, and he started pulling out things. Now, you're just like this old wrench, or, this old hammer, whatever. But he preached his message on that morning. We're a tool. We're an instrument. We're a child of God. And we need to glow, we need to shine, we need to do whatever we need to do that we can see the lost saved. Whatever it is, wherever we are, out in the world, wherever. We just need to do our best. Verse 25. And every man that striveth for the mastery is temperate in all things. Now they do it to obtain a corruptible crown. But we an incorruptible. Those that run that race and doing it for the best that they can to try to get that trophy. That old trophy, put it on the shelf and it looks good for a while, but 200-300 years from now, if the time still goes on, the ancestors done told it away or whatever, Anyway, but we as Christians are trying to gain an incorruptible crown. The good that we can do, but think of the ones that are saved. That's eternal. That ain't no time thing. It's eternal when someone comes to be saved. And we can be just like that old rusty wrench that I had to use back when I first started out. It did what I needed to do at the time. Okay? Whatever we are, we need to be doing whatever it is. Singing, preaching, teaching the kids, leading the kids, whatever it is. We need to be trying to see that we can point them a light to where they can be saved one of these days. Verse 26. I therefore so run, not as uncertainly. So fight I, not as one that beateth the air. He's not like in a race, in a marathon, and he's panting for breath or whatever. He's not doing that kind of a race. But he is trying to do his best for the Lord Christ. He sure is. But I keep under my body, and bring it into subjection, lest that by any means, when I have preached to others, I myself should be a castaway. One of him that said that I die daily, I believe it was, but anyway, he has to keep after himself. We sit down and just lay the Bible down and just stop going to church. The old devil's going to take over in no time. He's going to get a hold of us and get a grip on us. He has to keep under his body. In other words, the old devil can take over. I tell you what, it's been over 50 years since I started trying to teach, but I've had some times that I'd sit down, just close my Bible up, and say, that's it. And I don't know, just the old devil beat me down or whatever, and I've laid that old Bible down. And come about Tuesday or Wednesday, though, I'm reaching for that Bible. I couldn't stay away from it. I had to get it. Get that old Bible, pick it back up, start looking. Good Lord willing and good Lord's strength, I was able to stand the next Sunday and teach again. But the old devil sometimes would get me and, boy, you made a mess of it today. That's the devil's job. That's the devil's job, you know. Get up and do your best, and he's out there trying his best to put you back down. We need to do the best that we can do, and that's all we can do, what God gives us and what we can do. Anybody got any comments this morning? Appreciate your attention, your prayers this morning, comments. Pray much for the worship hour. Most of all, like I said, pray that someone might be saved today. Pray that just God come in a mighty way. Pray for our pastor. Falls his lot to stand today, that God just give him the very message we're in need of. And I've said this over and over, and I found it true. Whatever he preaches on, there's going to be a part in there for me. There's a part in there. God don't sit you down to a meal and not give you something to eat. There's going to be something in there for all of us. So it's for him, and let's pray that we have a good service today. That's all I have.